There we go. We are now recording, and I am going to. Can you see on the screen the presentation? Yeah.
I believe. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So let's hit play.
Hello everyone, I'm Marnie Roelink from MND New South Wales and I'm a support coordinator on the Central Coast. I'm here today to present a short PowerPoint presentation on SDA under NDIS, as this is a very confusing support and the areas are quite blurred in regards to what people know about SDA. So what is SDA? The National Disability Insurance Scheme, so NDIS, funds short-term accommodation and assistance under the core support category, assistance with daily living, also known as respite. SDA respite is funding under a person or participant's plan to allow for a short break for the participant, family and carers, which is called informal support. It is also a chance for the participant to try new things, have a change of scenery, connect to the community, and just have some time away. You may hear others mention holidays under NDIS. This is not language that NDIS normally use, but more of an interpretation from the participants and the families regarding SDA or respite. You can understand, however, how participants and families get confused in regards to SDA, as there are a lot of conflicting information on the internet and media, also by SDA providers themselves. So what does SDA and respite include or fund? It includes personal care, accommodation for the participant. The number of days vary according to the participant's needs and funding in their NDIS plan. It does not include funding for the participant's family. It includes food and sometimes on-site activities specific to that SDA. In regards to personal care, SDA funding does include this, whether it be the participant's care support that travels with them or care support that is organised by a provider in the area they are travelling to. Support coordination can definitely assist with this. Participants can travel with their family, but funding only covers the participant's accommodation. NDIS guidelines are that informal family support cannot be paid by NDIS funding for personal care support. SDA providers often cater for food within the price of the accommodation fees. See NDIS Price Guide 2020 and 21 for SDA rates per day. So rates differ according to the day of the week, whether it's a weekend or a public holiday. For any SDA providers, it's always good to get a quote to see if it fits within the plan budget for that particular participant, and you can always get a quote prior to the plan review. So how many days can be included in an NDIS plan for SDA? SDA have 3 levels of funding. The planner doesn't often discuss the level of funding when they're talking to the participant. Level 1 is 7 to 14 days per year. Level 2 is 14 to 28 days per year, and Level 3 is the equivalent of 28 days per year. If the participant has a high level of need, longer respite may be needed to get away independently, or to let the family have a break and maintain their caring role, or for them to have a breakaway with their carers. It's important to look at reasonable and necessary criteria to assist your participant with requesting a longer SDA in their plan if needed. Supporting participants with SDA funding. So it's important to have that conversation with the participant about what they want that SDA to look like, why they need that, and then going through what's called reasonable and necessary criteria. I know that everyone has heard this phrase over and over again, and it seems particularly broad, but that also leads into some flexibility as to how we can support that participant to request SDA. So during planning, you can think, does it relate to the participant's disability, help to pursue their goals, helps to participate in the community, is it value for money, and how much support your family and other informal supports provide that participant. This will potentially give NDIS all the information they need to look at approving under the RNN criteria. So what if a participant doesn't have respite or SDA in their plans or their needs change? You can assist in lodging a change of circumstance form to NDIS. And I have the link of this at the end of the PowerPoint presentation. So some conversations with participants when filling out a change of circumstance form can include they are needing respite or SDA to connect into the community more and engage with other participants and just have a breakaway. Allowing informal support such as family to have a break so they can maintain their role as carers and avoid carer burnout, which is really important. Is an increase in formal care supports in core needed within the plan to allow the carers that they currently have that they're familiar with to go with them on their SDA or respite? Has the participant looked at an SDA provider already? Can a quote for the accommodation be submitted with a change of circumstance? This is something the support coordinator can assist with. If a participant is looking into an SDA provider, make sure they have all the information necessary to quote, such as are they needing care support during their stay? Can the provider accommodate for their high care needs? What is the ratio? Is it one-to-one care support? Is it days or days and nights? Is it for a couple of hours or is it 24/7? This is really important information, making sure that that participant is being cared for while they're away, but it also can form part of that quote to look at, does this fit into the participant's plan or do I need to go into a plan review or lodge a change of circumstance? So some types of SDA and respite can include group accommodation stays, apartments or hotels specifically that cater to disability needs, respite accommodation, and cabins that are disability specific. When you're looking at these types of accommodations, it's good to have that conversation with the participant on how they would like that to be implemented into their plan. If there are particular places that they wish to stay that aren't NDIS managed, it's important to look at whether that budget needs to be plan or self-managed, which will allow the participants to draw flexibly from these funds. We all know that NDIS can have positive changes, but can be challenging at times, with areas of greys on supports and participants' plans. Approved support can vary according to the planner's knowledge and understanding. NDIS local areas are different, and political and government changes can affect these supports. Let's continue to work together, share knowledge, be proactive as we support participants with a quality of life. This is the end of the PowerPoint presentation, but I'd actually like to leave some time for questions and answers. I've also included at the end of this PowerPoint, which I can send through to you, specific links to what we spoke about today. And I'd like to thank you all for your time and also for the great job that you do.
Okay, so can everyone hear me again now?
Yep.
Excellent. So if I muted you, then I should be able to unmute you, but otherwise you'll need to unmute yourself.
I've unmuted.
Excellent. Hello, Sam. How are you going?
Good.
Excellent. All right. So that was NDIS holidays in a nutshell. I've got some questions that I would like to ask of Reese, but before I get going with mine, does anyone else have any questions that they would like to ask?
No, not me at the moment. Thank you.
Reese, can I ask, if you have to do a change of circumstance for the respite or the STA, will it, particularly from a carer burnout perspective, will it be processed any faster?
The short answer is no.
Okay.
But in saying that, if you look through the price guide and particularly in the catalogue, you'll note it's not a stated support and it's not a quote required support. So it can be used flexibly from core.
Okay.
It's a really good idea to stay within the reasonable limits of days, and it is potentially quite expensive against a plan that doesn't have it in it. So there's some logical limits there as well, but you can use it flexibly if you need to. Just on the language thing, I mean, we talk about how to, we talk about things amongst ourselves in different ways to how we would want to talk to them to the NDIS. When dealing with the NDIS with this, it's a very good idea to refer to it as short-term accommodation or respite. Some people are going to balk if we start using the term holiday because they simply don't view it that way. But it's definitely time away for someone who's accessing the service, and I understand that view completely. We just find we get a better result when we talk to the NDIS if we use their language.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, you can use it flexibly. Yeah. So you might not need to put in an urgent unscheduled plan review in it for at least for a short period of time, or you might have some coverage while things are changing. We've used it flexibly to support people that had some unexpected challenges with home modifications and whatnot. Access was reduced to bathrooms and whatnot for short periods of time, so it was used to cover that. And things like that. So you can use it quite flexible.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I think, Reece, to add to what you just said there, one of the reasons why we decided that this topic would be useful is because there is that sense that the NDIS fund holidays, and I think that's largely sort of put forward by these kind of adventure groups that
there are a few providers around promoting it that way, and it does give the wrong impression.
Yeah, definitely does. And then, like you say, when there's a suggestion of an NDIS funded holiday, then the NDIS gasp at the suggestion that they should be paying for
because
on holiday.
Because it'll end up on Today Tonight and be a big sensational thing and embarrass the minister.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a couple of people in the room that aren't NDIS funded; they're on my aged care funding. So it also draws even greater comparisons to the disadvantage to.
Absolutely. And absolutely. I mean, I can probably talk, if you want me to, a little bit about just how it can be used, some of the flexibility, if you'd like. That'd
be great if you could, yes.
So I mentioned earlier we've used I supported some participants in Sydney to use it in a very short notice to cover works going on in their home. They had some modifications going on and lost access to a bathroom, so we put them into some SDA for a couple of days, which was really useful. The funding can be used by, and again, depending on how your plan is managed, will restrict maybe how you can do this, but it can be used to cover the additional cost associated with a disability accessible room. So if you are travelling and there are some additional costs, that can be substantiated. So your room might be X amount, and the equivalent room that is accessible because it's bigger might be an extra $40 a night. Well, that $40 can be covered. So from that point of view, you could say, oh yeah, it's supporting a holiday, but really it's just participating in an ordinary life. And that is a way to look at it for those sorts of things. So we have had participants that have travelled and with their families, and that cost has been covered, which is the additional uplift cost. So there are those sorts of things as well.
So what if somebody wanted to travel overseas? I realise that's not an option for anybody right at this moment in time, but only quite recently that was a pretty standard practice that we'd holiday overseas. Will the NDIS cover any costs associated with an overseas?
You could reasonably expect the NDIS to pay for the cost of hiring of equipment. To travel overseas. You could reasonably expect them to pay for some costs associated with care and care workers that may be travelling with you, but they wouldn't be paying for someone to travel with you and airfares and all that sort of stuff. And it would be recommended that is consulted with a planner what can and can't be charged beforehand, because different people are going to have different views on that, and it's particularly rare. So that's a difficult one.
Okay, so paying for the cost of hire equipment, would that need to be through an Australian hire organisation? You take the equipment with you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so you couldn't engage a local equipment hire service in a different country with your NDIS?
Oh, I think reasonably you could, but you'd be paying it for yourself and you'd have to claim it back. So the way your plan was set up would need to support the ability to claim that back.
Yeah, okay.
yeah, you could do that. Yeah, I think that would be, again, that meets reasonable and necessary. And is probably a more cost-effective option than putting a device on an aeroplane.
Okay. Sorry, Ross, were you indicating you had?
I was just wondering, in the PowerPoint presentation, there was talk of level 1 to level 3 equating to 7, 14, 28.
Yeah.
How might somebody, how is a person categorized?
Hey,
That's an internal NDIS guideline where they just have levels for things. Categorization for SDA is the same principles as anything else within the NDIS. It's based on evidence of need.
Right.
We just fall back on the NDIS's principles of supporting people to live an ordinary life, meeting reasonable and necessary, and being cost effective. So it's more just a guideline. I think that was put into the presentation more just to show this is the possibility that it's somewhere between 7 and 28 days in a year that you could reasonably expect access.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. So, Reece, when we were talking about overseas holidays, you mentioned that the NDIS wouldn't cover the cost of carers' travel.
No.
And carers' food. So the participant themselves is responsible for those costs?
Yes, they would be, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there like a guideline around how much you should pay somebody for food each day?
That would be something you would need to negotiate with the care provider that was providing that. I think practically speaking, it would be highly unlikely to be able to be done. To take someone overseas with you, unless they were wanting to basically work for free or pay their own travel costs, and because they were kind of their holiday kind of coincided with yours. So much associated with that sort of travel that the NDIS wouldn't want to pay for, and they would consider it to be an everyday expense kind of thing. That's where we would run into significant challenge. And holidaying is very different to respite care.
shut them.
And so what about it talks about habits with the
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. I do apologise.
that's what that sounds dogs.
Very true.
I'll mute you for a second whilst they okay. All right. So sorry, Reece. I was just saying, what about Airbnb? Would that be considered as something that you could pay for yourself and reclaim for accommodation costs?
That I don't know, to be perfectly honest. If there was holidaying is considered to be an everyday, expense. It's not from the NDIS's point of view. They don't necessarily cover it. They cover respite. If that was the most suitable from a respite perspective, then yes, if you could justify it as reasonable and necessary, it's got disability support, etc. Then I believe that the NDIS would pay at least part of it. Again, you're more looking at the uplift difference between a regular room and the additional cost of an accessible room.
Yeah, fair enough. And I guess that's difficult to determine on something like Airbnb where there isn't necessarily.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's my questions done. Did anyone else have any others? Can we wrap up? No?
No.
All right, well, thank you, Reece.
My pleasure.
And particularly, Marnie, you've put a lot of time and effort into recording that for us, which is a really useful resource for both our clients and staff going forward. So please pass on our thanks to Marnie and to Karen at New South Wales as well.
I will. I'll pass it on. And look, thanks for the opportunity to talk with you guys as well. I've appreciated it.
Thank you.